when you realise through a computer you could read so much, you could see so much, you could communicate a lot more widely. To me, it was an obvious way the world was going to go, and I wanted to be part of it. And I was somewhat frustrated. I think a lot of the army was.
Yeah.
So I saw an opportunity to get out, or I saw the opportunity to start a business. That being a dial-up internet service provider. I was actually in a rented army married quarter. And I thought, I need to start this business. I need to install I think I installed 14 phone lines. And people asked me, was that hard to get permission to install the phone lines as well? I knew they'd say no, so it was a pointless conversation. So I just went and did it.
Welcome to the Get Invested podcast, where we share great conversations with experts from all walks of life to uncover their secret know-how and where they invest their time, their skills, and their money, and the benefits that this has created. You see, the truth is that everyone invests. Every minute of every day, we're investing our time, our skills, our energy, and our money in something. Some of us are investing consciously, some unconsciously, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, and sometimes for no impact. Get Invested will help you to start living by design, not by default. I'm going to help you to make it happen, not let it happen. You will hear the top tips on how you can live with conscious intent so that you can live more, work less, and leave a living legacy by investing now. Listen to the show to discover the top tips on how to get started, make the most of your investment journey, and ultimately to be living your dream, not someone else's. More episodes can be found on iTunes or at bushymartin.com.au/get invested. Thanks for listening, and now let's get invested. Hi, freedom fighters. Have you ever had a great idea? You know, a light bulb moment for a breakthrough that could change the world? Or have you ever seen or heard of a groundbreaking opportunity or technology that you just know is the way of the future, and you just know you need to be part of it? What did you do about it? Or what will you do about it? Are you dreaming about earning millions or even billions of dollars by launching and investing in a business around that idea or this new disruption? So what are you doing about it? Like today's very special guest, are you just going to grab the bull by the horns and just go ahead and do it? Because this is one of the key ingredients that separates wannabes and gunners from the true entrepreneurs. The rare ones that see an opportunity, back themselves, and just have a crack. So, do you want to become an entrepreneur? And do you really have an entrepreneurial spirit? What's your image of entrepreneurs? And what does it take to be a successful entrepreneur? And what else separates successful entrepreneurs from the rest of us? Well, today we're going to answer all of these questions. And given the stature of today's very special guest, along with the depth of our great wide-ranging conversation, we're rolling it out in two parts. This week, we'll look at what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur alongside our guest Steve Baxter's own journey. While next week, we'll delve into what makes a successful startup business and how you go about evaluating and investing in them. So to kick things off, when I mention the term entrepreneur, what image do you see in your mind's eye? Let me paint the typical picture that's so well captured by Mark LaRusti. Imagine a dude with a beard on a TED Talk stage wearing a baseball cap backwards or sideways, while donning a crumpled lived-in black t-shirt with a single word on it that goes with their board shorts and flip-flops or sneakers with ankle socks. And the dude starts by taking a selfie with the crowd as a backdrop, and he posts on Insta with the hashtags living the dream, hashtag winning, hashtag crushing it. And their life is just so amazing. They wake up at 5 a.m. every day without an alarm, with a big smile on their face because their passion drives them. They enjoy some power yoga and a meditation before hopping into a cold shower where they visualise their goals, and then down a green smoothie while jumping on as a celebrity guest on a podcast interview. And all of this before you've even had time to open your eyes and scroll through your first social media feed for the day. Now, unlike us mere mortals, these entrepreneurs have the freedom to decide how they spend their days and go on holiday when they want and wherever they want. And And we know this intimately because we follow their dream life posts of snaps with the rich and famous in exotic places on Instagram, because their first, last and middle name is success. Now, this is the romantic and idyllic illusion that has been created for the growing legion of entrepreneurs that are supposedly changing the world with a keystroke, and then selling their idea for mega millions so they can sunbake in a hammock on the beach of a tropical paradise for the rest of their life while sipping bottomless pina coladas. But is this dream the reality? I think you already know the answer. Before we get to that, let's start by defining what is an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is defined as an individual that starts their own business to make money on their own terms. Another definition reveals that an entrepreneur is a sole proprietor that has the majority shares in a particular incorporated venture. In today's world, entrepreneurs are individuals that start their own business, whether it's a tech startup or a makeup company. You see, for me, the term entrepreneur is another one of those overused and largely misunderstood and misinterpreted terms that's become very trendy, sexy and aspirational, to the point where just about everyone calls themselves some sort of preneur. At last count, I could find about 27 different classifications, which, according to Tyler Horvath, range from entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs who develop innovative ideas within the company they work for, solopreneurs who are business people that operate completely on their own. Then there's infopreneurs, mumpreneurs, socialpreneurs, and ecopreneurs that create eco-friendly services and products. Startuppreneurs are startup founders that have an idea for the next great company. Then we get into an endless stream of ever increasingly specialised forms of preneur classifications that cover just about anything you can tack the term preneur on the end. Webpreneurs are individuals that earn their income solely through interactions online. The epreneur is an entrepreneur that focuses their efforts on e-commerce. And epreneurs, like webpreneurs, operate their businesses solely on the internet. Epreneurs can operate any business ranging from an extensive online store to running online shopping platforms like eBay. Freepreneurs are defined by the way they use low-cost methods to start and run their business. Freepreneurs do all they can to source their resources and materials without having to invest their own money. Expatpreneurs refers to an expatriate who chooses to start their business abroad. Then there are also veterapreneurs, who are veterans that start their own businesses. We also have minipreneurs, who make money based on their skills, interests and knowledge, and use the entrepreneurial spirit to monetize their knowledge and experiences. Now, to me, this is just a fancy word for a freelancer or a consultant. Then we have skepticpreneurs, who describe business people that are cynical of making particularly risky business decisions. Studentpreneurs are entrepreneurs that start their businesses while they're still students. And then there are also Twitterpreneurs, who make their money through their entrepreneurial efforts on Twitter by building their audiences, increasing their authority, and turning a profit through this social platform. I recently heard the term comfortpreneurs, who apparently are business owners who refuse to adapt, improve, or change their business structure and strategies, and tend to run their businesses in the same way older generations have, which sounds to me like a recipe for disaster. And here's another good one: wingpreneurs, who are the wingmen of the entrepreneurial world. Apparently, wingpreneurs provide knowledge, support, funding, skills, and the like to entrepreneurs that are just starting a business. Now, that sounds like a fancy word for business consultant or mentor. Then we have the passivepreneur, who's an entrepreneur that focuses on creating a stream of passive income. Now, I thought they were just successful investors. And then we have the antipreneur, which is the opposite of the entrepreneur, where the antipreneur is against large corporations and they work to build their own business but want to completely avoid the traditional capitalistic corporate route. In other words, they change the world while living off the smell of an oily rag like starving artists. And I love this one: Wantrepreneurs. Wantrepreneurs have the desire to be an entrepreneur but haven't quite found a way to follow through with their dreams yet. They're missing the self-direction, the motivation, the capital and the daily routine that true entrepreneurs have. They're what I prefer to call wannabes and gunners. A further derivation of this are the fauxpreneurs, who aspire to be entrepreneurs but aren't. They have different concepts and product ideas, but fail to have a solid plan to develop a company. They focus on building apps and aim to get rich quick, but they just don't follow through. Now, I don't know about you, but this is starting to feel like the canine world, where the original wolf has been bred, crossbred and inbred into an endless array of dogs of all shapes, sizes and colours that suit just about every situation and circumstance. On top of this, we've now got multipreneurs, who are entrepreneurs that are involved in multiple projects at the same time or have multiple businesses on the go at the same time. A bit like one-armed jugglers on a motorcycle. And of course, the creme de la creme goes to the serial entrepreneur, which I used to think was someone who created a new brand of muesli or breakfast cereal. But it's often code for the fact that you've had a trail of failed startups and are still trying to find the Holy Grail. Now, in conjunction with this almost viral-preneur pandemic, we used to have CEOs and MDs, but now everyone's become a founder or a co-founder. Big titles that may not have much substance. A bit like one of my good father Bushy Sr.'s favourite country farm sayings. They wear big hats, but have no cattle. Many are kings without a kingdom. So it feels like everyone has become a preneur of some description. It seems that anyone who works for themselves from home using their laptop and mobile phone, operating on the kitchen table, their bedroom or out of a coffee shop, is an instant entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs have become very hip and very cool. But does the hype match the reality? Certainly not in my experience. When we started our first and ongoing businesses, and when we've worked with other entrepreneurial startups, cool was certainly not a word I'd use to describe the lifestyle. Most of the time, entrepreneurs, startups and new business founders who have quit their corporate 9 to 9 jobs, sidebar, used to be 9 to 5, but those days are long gone, and they've taken the leap of faith off the financial cliff to become their own boss and enjoy the supposed bottomless flexibility, freedom and success that goes with it, are actually lonely, worried about their business and constantly stressed about money and how they're going to afford to pay for their next meal. It doesn't matter if you're a one-man band or a business with 1,000 employees, and it doesn't matter if you have 100 social media followers or 1 million. The resounding feeling for all early entrepreneurs is how tough the journey is. And the scary stats support this. Out of 5.5 million businesses in the UK, 76% are started by people who employ no one but themselves. So it starts as a very lonely journey for 3 out of every 4. But this hasn't stopped the literal explosion of entrepreneurial startups, with over 300 new businesses starting every hour of every working day, according to Oberlo, which equates to over 627,000 a year. And according to Dragomir Simovic, there are currently about 582 million entrepreneurs in the world. But according to First Sight Guide, there are currently only 600 unicorn startups around the world that are valued at $1 billion or more. And the highest value private startup in the world is ByteDance from China, worth around $75 billion, with Elon Musk's SpaceX sitting in 4th place with a $33.3 billion valuation. So if we measure the 600 unicorn startups as a percentage of the total number of entrepreneurs, that's a mere 0.0001%. Or in other words, a 1 in 970,000 chance of reaching this level. Not great odds. And where's the best place in the world to be an entrepreneur? Well, with a global entrepreneurship index of 83.6 out of 100 according to GEDI, the the US is the best country for entrepreneurs. Now, this Global Entrepreneurial Index, or GEI, is a numerical representation of the climate a country creates for the development of small businesses. This index takes into account numerous factors to create one comprehensive overview. So on this GEI scale, Switzerland comes in with an unexpected second place with 80.4, followed by Canada, the UK, and Australia in fifth place. So we actually have a great supportive entrepreneurial culture. So when someone says entrepreneur or startup, we usually think of various success stories and exponential business growth. However, in reality, not all startups are successful. We usually only hear about the winners, but this doesn't tell the whole story. And here's the interesting stat. According to Bloomberg, 8 out of 10 entrepreneurs fail within the first 18 months, and according to First Sight Guide, 9 out of 10 startups don't make it at all. That's a 90% failure rate, with 70% of startups dissolving within 10 years and only 40% of startups ever being able to become profitable. And recent work by Professor Michael Freeman from the University of California studied the link between entrepreneurship and mental health issues and found that 1 in 3 entrepreneurs suffer from depression. And it's easy to understand why, when the chance of an entrepreneur's first or second startup ending in survival is only about 20%, with the odds getting slightly better after the first 2 attempts at 30% according to Forbes, which is actually still pretty terrifying. So have we been sold the dummy on entrepreneurship? And what separates successful entrepreneurs from the rest? Well, according to Mark Larusti, the rise of superstar entrepreneurs like Elon Musk, Richard Branson and Steve Jobs has given birth to the new aspiring celebrity of the 21st century, with a deluge of social media and magazine front covers, making it all sound sexy and cool, which feeds into our need to be recognised, famous and rich, especially when compared to what many consider as being trapped on the treadmill, stuck in their mundane jobs where 87% of workers worldwide feel emotionally disengaged, according to a Gallup study. So against this backdrop, imagine this job ad, borrowed again from Larusti. People wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, doubtful safe return, and the only reward, honour and recognition in case of success. Would you apply? And do you know what this ad is for? Well, according to Julian Lewis Watkins' book, The 100 Greatest Advertisements, this ad attracted 5,000 applicants for Sir Ernest Shackleton's ad for his third expedition to the South Pole in the early 1900s. But given what we've talked about, the ad could just as easily apply to any bold entrepreneurial venture or startup. And interestingly, Shackleton sorted the 5,000 applicants into 3 groups: the mad, the hopeless, or the possible. So which category of entrepreneur do you fit into? It's a bit like what I was told before I went to work as an architect in New Guinea for 2 years, way back in the late 70s, straight after I finished uni. Everyone said that to go to PNG, you had to be either a missionary, a mercenary, or a madman. I'm still trying to figure out which one I fit into, so I'll let you be the judge. So what separates the best entrepreneurs from the rest? Well, according to research conducted by Amy Wilkinson from Stanford University in the US, it all starts with how successful entrepreneurs see things and the world differently. For example, her research shows that we all catch things out of the corner of our eye, like when we're travelling to work. We might catch something or see something that looks unusual. And the vast majority of us just dismiss it because they're in a routine. But entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial alert individuals jump on it and start asking questions. They're curious. They notice something that's unusual or a glitch and find a gap to explore it. So it starts with being alert and curious. Now, in the financial investment world, we call this arbitrage. There's a glitch, and if you capitalise on this and trade quickly, you can make a lot of money in that arbitrage moment. And this exists in the entrepreneurial environment as well. If you can see a glitch or detect an anomaly and go for it, you can potentially harness a big entrepreneurial outcome. And in order to spot gaps or unfulfilled problems and needs, many entrepreneurs observe what's working somewhere else and then ask the question, why isn't it working here? What's working with it over there, and what are the fundamental underlying principles that make that work? And then reapply it here or somewhere else. Consider this example. In the early 1970s, an entrepreneur named Howard Schultz was in Italy, and he observed the awesome coffee culture. He went to a conference in Italy, and he fell in love with the fact that the Italians all left home, and before they got to their conference or arrived at the office, most of them stopped at a coffee house. So this was the third place they all went. If home was their first place and the office was their second place, then their third place was their local coffee house. So he sees this, he loves this, and then he picks it up and brings it back home to Seattle in the US. And initially, he cut and pasted, but it just didn't quite work. In his first coffee shop, the staff all wore bow ties and customers drank out of small white porcelain cups, standing up at a coffee bar with opera music playing in the background. It all looked, felt, smelt and tasted very Italian. But this didn't work in Seattle. So he adapted the third place model to a local flavour. That became, who do you think? Starbucks. And Starbucks created a coffee culture that's now the world's largest coffee house chain. Yes, it's now a much more casual setting. You can sit and work on your laptop, you can talk with others, and it can be a workplace for many people as their third location. So this is the entrepreneurial idea, that you see something elsewhere and you transport it with a twist. You can move and translate across geographies, as well as sectors, or bring old ideas up to date, or move across time. Here's another good example. Entrepreneurs Larry Page and Sergey Brin saw the Stanford Library ranking system of old card catalogues and applied that old idea of searching to the World Wide Web. And what was born? Google. Now at the time, there were a heap of other search engines like AltaVista, but they managed to take an old idea and bring it into the new world of work that created something really powerful. So this is another way to spot a gap. Just look for something that works, fly it across somewhere else and give it a little twist. And academia calls this reason by analogy. There's a lot of powerful research showing that if you compare and contrast, if you draw analogies, then you access more of your brain power. Now, another way that Stanford has identified successful entrepreneurs who see things differently is that many act like an architect, which is of course easy for me to imagine, given that I practiced as an architect for 25 odd years before shifting into full-time investment. So the concept here is that architects are always spotting design opportunities and solving complex spatial problems through clever design. You take in a space and you design and build from the ground up. Just as an architect designs and builds a brand new building in an open area, successful entrepreneurs find a space or a problem that hasn't yet been addressed. It's a friction point, a bottleneck, or a problem for you or others. In this regard, Elon Musk is a good example because he's in the world saying, designing and building solutions to solve humanity's problems. And so Tesla is solving the problem of sustainable transport, while SpaceX is solving the problem of making life multi-planetary. Now, these are huge problems. Musk literally believes that SpaceX is the vehicle and the next step to helping humans take life to other planets. And Mars is the planet he believes we should inhabit next. He's an architect because what he's doing is designing and building something from the ground up. So if you take SpaceX, he went to NASA and asked, when is the US space program going to Mars? How come we're not doing this? The problem hasn't been solved, so there's an open space. Then he travelled to Russia and asked them if they were doing it. And as they weren't, He also talked to the Chinese, but no government was building rockets that would go to Mars. And so SpaceX was born as a private company to build a reusable rocket by reasoning from first principles. This means breaking things down to the fundamental elements and the basic axioms, which is the way that many mathematicians and physicists reason, as Elon was originally trained as a physicist. You figure out the fundamental truths and the elements, and then build piece by piece from the ground up. In this fashion, SpaceX has taken over the contracts to resupply the International Space Station and is doing it at 1/10 of the price that NASA was. So this is solving an unsolved problem by building something with the elements in a different way from the ground up. The next type of entrepreneurial thinking is what Stanford calls an integrator. An integrator is a person that looks at putting things together that haven't been put together before by mashing and smashing concepts together. Sometimes this works and others it doesn't. And then occasionally it creates extraordinary opportunity. For example, in the past you had luxury car sedans or big all-terrain four-wheel drive vehicles that were completely different. But if you put these two together, you end up with a luxury SUV, which has now become a huge segment of the car market. This is an example of being an integrator, of putting two things together and creating a new category. So successful entrepreneurs go out in the world and look for things to combine, like online retail sites and discounted luxury good auction sites as an example. So successful entrepreneurial integrators mash and smash things together and create novelty at the intersections. The next key quality of successful entrepreneurs is their curiosity that unlocks the ability to spot opportunities. As I've said on many occasions before, it's increasingly important to every single one of us to continue to ask questions and continue to believe that we can discover and probe and learn more and more every single day. But the Achilles heel here is that many people believe they're experts, and anyone who already believes they have expertise stops asking questions, which is very dangerous and very limiting. But an entrepreneur who wants to spot opportunity and wants to create something new in the world or wants to keep up with a rapidly changing world needs to adopt curiosity as their best friend. Curiosity is a tool to be alert and to see things that other people don't see. But unfortunately, a lot of our questioning nature has been bludgeoned out of us by our conformist education and our world of compliance. So rediscover your childhood curiosity and continuously ask why. So you need to be very clearly understand. You need to very clearly understand the problem you're solving and know that the problem is big enough and of the right quality that people will pay you handsomely to actually solve it. That's a very key point right there. But creating innovative solutions to unsolved problems and needs is just the starting point, and it's only just scratching the surface when it comes to being a successful entrepreneur. Ideas are nothing unless the right action's taken. So what else does it take? Is it being a born go-getter? Is it having an extroverted personality? Is it being charismatic enough to persuade customers? While some entrepreneurs may hold some of these traits, they rarely define the characteristics of every successful entrepreneur. Not everyone is born with a drive to change the world. In fact, many successful entrepreneurs today are people who you may have actually underestimated in high school or at college. A living example of this is Bill Gates, who famously said, "If I had $1 for every time someone made fun of me in high school, oh wait, I do." Now, anyone has the potential to become a successful entrepreneur. However, according to Ben Walker from Forbes, there are a few key personality traits that all or almost all successful entrepreneurs have in common. Firstly, they have an unwavering belief and focus, belief in themselves, and total focused belief in the benefits of the problem they're solving. They're unshakable and almost fanatically undeterred about solving the problem. The solution may change and evolve over time, but the commitment to solving the problem is absolutely ironclad. They have a steely resilience that never gets thrown off course. Secondly, They have a very robust and disciplined and almost obsessive work ethic. They'll work around the clock to get things done. They're the ones who always have work on their mind even when they're enjoying personal time. Thirdly, they develop a deep passion for what they're doing. And work ethic and passion go hand in hand. It takes work ethic to keep the business strong, and it takes passion to feel motivated enough to maintain a good work ethic. They're successful because they choose to do what they love. Fourthly, they're motivated self-starters. A self-starter doesn't settle for a draining 9-to-5 job. A self-starter doesn't give up at the first sign of struggle. And a self-starter doesn't hold things off until it's too late. A self-starter is someone who does what needs to be done without being asked or encouraged to do so. They take the initiative on their own projects and they lead themselves. They recognise that when things get hard, it's a challenge that helps them grow as an entrepreneur and makes the business stronger. Entrepreneurs have to be self-starters to help their businesses scale rapidly in today's cutthroat business world. Next, they're flexible and adaptable. When plans need to change and an entire project needs to be redone, a successful entrepreneur shakes off any inconveniences and starts from scratch without getting into a huge rut. In fact, most entrepreneurs will tell you that their businesses turned out much differently from what they had originally envisaged. They use a mental GPS instead of a rigid roadmap, so they can roll with the punches and go in different directions that take them closer to the desired end result. It's about being open to possibilities and options and going with the flow, taking new opportunities as they come, not getting stuck in a certain mindset and being receptive to changes and even criticism. Successful entrepreneurs can take a bad situation and spin it around to their advantage. They see obstacles as opportunities, not as roadblocks. In my humble opinion, to have any chance of being a successful entrepreneur, on top of your curiosity and creativity, you need to have a single-minded focus, an unwavering belief in yourself and your idea. You need loads of discipline, persistence and patience. You need the ability to fail fast, fail often and fail forward. You need to be flexible and adaptive to evolving the business and have the rare ability to attract, persuade and motivate other great people to fulfill the dream and vision and turn it into reality. As well as the ability to surround yourself with people that are better than yourself and potentially be comfortable doing yourself out of your job. So the chance of successfully coming up with a groundbreaking idea, seeing it through, making it profitable, and then selling it are tougher and less likely than winning a gold medal at the Olympics. So this is no mean feat. This is a big ask, so you can see why successful entrepreneurs are very rare commodities. And someone who possesses all of these entrepreneurial qualities in spades and has the demonstrated business success on multiple occasions to prove it is today's very special guest, Steve Baxter. Steve is one of Australia's most successful tech entrepreneurs, an active investor, a mentor to startups, and a shark on Channel 10's very popular Shark Tank Australia. He's the living epitome of the old saying that today I'll invest in what others won't, so tomorrow I can do what others can't. In 1994, at the tender age of just 23, Steve put his total life savings of $11,000 on the line to launch his first startup, the pioneering internet service provider SENet, from the spare room of his Adelaide home, as you'll hear in detail during our chat today. And it was around that time that I had the pleasure of first meeting Steve, as his business partner was a mutual and long-term friend of mine, Chris Foote, or Dick, as my brother and I affectionately called him. And we were in a number of rock and roll bands with Chris over the years, and Steve, Chris and my brother all got together to celebrate Dick's wedding. So a big shout out to Dick and my brother Ian Bushy Jr. on this one. Growing rapidly to service more than 35,000 customers, SENet was eventually sold and acquired by Aussiemail under the stewardship of its founding director and past Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull. In 2001, Steve then teamed up with a schoolmate to launch his second startup, Pipe Networks, a provider of wholesale telecoms infrastructure that was listed on the ASX in 2005. 8 years later, they sold it to TPG Group for the princely sum of just $373 million. A truly hard-fought and life-changing moment. Steve then spent a year working with Google in California in 2008, leading a project to deliver high-speed telecommunication systems across North America. Since 2010, he's become an early-stage investor in startups through his investment company, Transition Level Investments. This led to the founding of Brisbane tech startup hub River City Labs and the creation of Startup Catalyst and River Pitch programs. And he's been championing Australian startups and entrepreneurs ever since. He's also been on the listed boards of Vocus Telecoms, Indoor Skydive Australia Group and other levels, as well as being on the board of Commercialisation Australia. Steve's also been heavily involved in the early days of founding numerous industry groups and forums such as the South Australian Internet Association, the South Australian Internet Exchange, Australian Domain Name Authority, and a host of others. Steve now runs 1013, an investment syndicate platform for sophisticated investors to invest alongside him and the experienced Transition Level Investments team. As, unlike many venture capitalists, Steve puts his own cash on the dash to the tune of an average of 15 to 20% of every seed deal. 1013 understand that to get great returns, you need to invest in global companies. So they built a global portfolio across 5 continents with a portfolio value of over $2 billion in their first 18 months. So if you're a sophisticated investor looking to diversify your portfolio and invest in top caliber technology companies, reach out to Steve and his high caliber 1013 investment team who want to take exhaustive due diligence before they invest in tech startups. And if you want to start investing in your knowledge, join me and many other like-minded investors in our Get Invested community right now. I send a free and exclusive monthly email full of practical self, health and wealth wisdom that our current Freedom Fighter subscribers can't wait to get every month. It's full of investment and lifestyle tips, my personal book recommendations, apps I use to enhance life and so much more. Just visit bushymartin.com.au and sign up at the bottom of the page, because this is just the beginning. As Steve Baxter has said so well in the past, it's never been a better time to start a business or invest in a business, as it's exceptionally inexpensive and there are a lot of great tools you can use. So don't die wondering, give it a go. And the best way to get motivated to get invested is to enjoy part 1 of this great conversation with Steve Baxter.
Hi, Freedom Fighters. Now, in the continuous radical uncertainty of our post-COVID world, which has turned things upside down and created a catalyst for massive change and opportunity, it's become clear that the future of our great country hangs in the balance. As an island nation, we continue to stick our heads in the sand and continue to do what we've always done, then we're going to see our coveted way of life gradually die in the vine like frogs in the boiling pot. Or, alternatively, we can rise to the challenge and reposition Australia at the forefront of the emerging new world by investing in new and exciting tech startup business opportunities with global reach. So to make sense of where we're at and open our minds to this massive opportunity, I'm joined by a preeminent leader in the tech startup world, both as a successful founder and entrepreneur, and now as a tech startup investor, Steve Baxter. So welcome and let's get invested, Steve.
G'day, Bushy. How you doing?
Great, mate. Been looking forward to catching up with you for ages because I really enjoy your very forthright, no nonsense and straight to the point approach. So getting straight onto that, mate. For those who've been living under rocks in this country, mate, and don't know who you are, can you give us a rundown on who you are, what you do, and most importantly, why you do what you do?
Yeah, no problems. I suppose I would categorise myself as an early stage tech startup investor, which typically means that we're some of the first institutional money into very early stage technology, primarily software businesses. I've been doing that for about 10 years, I suppose. Prior to that, I was a twice-washed telecoms entrepreneur, which is essentially how we know each other. A friend of ours is my first business partner is a mutual friend of ours. Chris.
Yeah.
So from down in Adelaide. So that was a business we had down in Adelaide. I started when I was 23 called SENet. And Chris came in about a year into my journey, and he came on as we call them co-founders nowadays. We used to call ourselves business partners back then, but nowadays we're called co-founders apparently.
Yeah, it's more trendy these days, mate.
Yeah, it's a lot more trendy. We used to be managing directors, and now we're CEOs and co-founders and all sorts of snazzy names. It's awesome. And then I had a business in Brisbane called Pipe Networks, which I started with a chap I went to school with up in Rockhampton. So telecoms, which led to a couple of pretty good exits, and then now I'm basically an investor. I've got no real desire to run an operational business. So we do run an investing business. So that's a bit different. And I'm sort of out there backing people's dreams and success. Their dreams for success, I suppose, and hopefully they find it.
Yeah, love it, mate. Well, I wouldn't mind sort of digging into some of the prehistoric history there, particularly if you don't mind, because I think it's a pretty interesting journey. And one of the things that I like, having done the Google stalk, mate, is that you're one of the other few people I've come across, like myself, who started school at 4 and finished school at 15. So
yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, nowadays that golly, you wouldn't send a 4-year-old to grade 1 nowadays, would you?
No, you wouldn't, mate. Yeah, how did that affect you, mate? Because I know that I was always a foot shorter than everyone else, and undeveloped in a lot of ways, which means I had to work a lot bloody harder to achieve the same things. How did that influence your journey, mate?
I don't know. Probably best to ask people who observed me, I suppose, rather than myself. I never particularly noticed it. I do recall my mother in particular sort of later, when I was a sort of young teenager, ruining that she sent me to school so early, which is a curious memory to have. I wasn't too fussed, I suppose. I didn't do too bad up until grade 10. Grade 11, I just fell in. I don't know, just young boys, you boys are different, right? Regardless of what they say, boys are different.
Yeah.
And so, there's some pretty, when you're going through puberty, there's some pretty raging stupid shit that you do. And I probably fell in a bit of that in grade 11. I was lucky that, I actually left at 15 and went and joined the regular army back when they could recruit 15-year-olds. So I signed up for 9 years as a 15-year-old. How scary is that? And I loved it, boys on adventure. I wanted to carry a rifle, wanted to, in inverted commas, defend the country, all that sort of patriotic stuff that I still believe in, but I probably, I had a little more, understood it less when I was 15 than I do now, I suppose. And no, it was great, with Boys on Adventure, made some great mates and learnt some awesome lessons.
Yeah, let's talk about some of those lessons, because the sort of discipline and the hard-nosed, no bullshit approach, and probably a fairly hierarchical approach, I'd imagine, mate. What sort of an imprint that leave on your future journey, do you reckon?
Yeah, look, and I get asked this a lot, understandably, given, it was 9 of my first 23 years, so, it does make a lot of sense. So I think what I take from that is I take it gave me one hell of a work ethic. Look, the technology I learnt while I was in the army, I was in a phase of I suppose electronics and systems that did a radical change in the sort of early mid-90s. Went from, I suppose, very basic components and integrated circuits to exceptionally integrated and exceptionally high density stuff. So there was a real step change in electronics, and you basically didn't repair this stuff. You sort of, if it stopped working, you threw it away. So a lot of what we learned wasn't as applicable. So, but on the work ethic side, it was a very honest organisation. If you're a second late to work, you might as well just take yourself straight to jail, because there's usually no violence and handcuffs involved in getting you there. So I have an absolute I have an absolute disrespect for anyone who doesn't respect work hours. Just be polite. Turn up to the bloke who's paying you or the person who's paying you. It's just, politeness is an amazing thing. Being able to do the job regardless. I mean, we used to work hard and party hard, and no one really cared how hard you partied, providing you turn up into the job. You could have stopped drinking 2 hours before you were doing your 5K run. It doesn't matter how many vomits you had during the run. Before you got it finished, no one really gave a stuff, if you know what I mean. As soon as it impacted your job, then there was a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it was a lot of the feedback was exceptionally martial, if you could interpret that as you please. But it was a martial occupation. If you can't take a clip around the ears, you're probably no good to bayonet charge. So, that's just a factor of the job, right?
Yeah, I heard you say once that the derogatory term, if you ever copped it as a jack, was pretty embarrassing. Just share that story with us.
Oh,
mate.
Jack is something that never leaves an Aussie digger. I think, and the term digger is interesting. I tried to. The Army brought me back to a few of these Army, and very, very generously brought me back to these things called Army Innovation Days. And I want to thank Colonel Kieran Joyce for that. I mean, his dad just joined the Air Force as a wing commander, but he got me back involved there, which is great. And so I've had to do a lot of thinking about that, because I was addressing a room full of colonels and generals at one point, and I was a corporal, for Christ's sakes. I used to carry these guys' bags, if you know what I mean. So it was all very generous, it's for sure. And I had to have a good hard think about what it meant to be a soldier. And the term digger to me is a bit special. I think, if you know the Australian history of that term, it should be special. If you respect the Australian history of that term, it should be special.
Yeah.
And you don't become a digger by enlisting it. At some point, when you're accepted as being a soldier by your mates and by your comrades, that's when you become a digger. And at some point it happens, and you don't realise it. So and that's sort of pretty cool. So, but the term jack is almost opposite to the term digger. Jack was some guy in World War I or II who did the wrong thing and was basically just an arsehole to his mates. Essentially, was lazy, wouldn't do the right thing, wouldn't pitch in with a team. And to be called Jack is just, it's the opposite to digger. So you never wanted that. You ran 1,000 miles from that.
Yeah, I'm showing my age now, Steve, but when I was a kid, we used to call each other digger all the time, and it was a real term of respect for someone who, knuckled down.
It was an old term for mate, a digger or cobber. It was sort of the same thing, wasn't it, really?
It was, yeah. And as a country boy like yourself, we used to throw that around a fair bit, actually. And it's funny, when I catch up with those guys that went to school with in the country, donkeys years ago now, we still call each other digger and cobber, and it's yeah.
But the best part is it's funny when we get together, mates. I know I've got quite a few blokes that serve that are in the city, and a couple in nearby suburbs as well. And we've done the 20, 25, and every year 30th reunion. 35th was supposed to be in January. It's not going to be now. It'll probably be like later September next year once this stupid nation gets its head back on straight after COVID.
Yeah.
But it's funny, you get together and a lot of the functions, a lot of these are social outlets. Our families come along to our wives and partners and whatnot. And the way we talk to each other, like my wife pulled me aside at one point and said, if I didn't know you people were friends, I thought a fight was going to start. Because we literally, it doesn't matter that you joined at the same time and you might have been in the same unit, but I was an electronics technician, and they used to call us boffins, and the vehicle mechanics we used to call grazers, and the fitter armourers we called black trades, and the carpenters and joiners were all chippies and stuff. And sometimes a term, depending how you said it, it was an insult or a term of endearment. You know what I mean? Yeah. And she just sit back and goes, if I didn't know you were all friends, I honestly thought a fight was about to break out. So it's just what blokes. This is what I think. What people, not blokes, was plenty. We were one of the first intakes that had females involved, and a couple of those still come along to the reunions and the marches and whatever as well. So just people in those sort of closed confinements and those sort of really quite I don't even describe it, but matey is probably not the right word. But
yeah,
those environments, it's just you do it. You just know you don't take shit to heart.
Do you think we've lost a bit of that, mate? I think we got soft, don't you?
We're letting ourselves get soft, if you know what I mean. So, but the more you give into it, the more you let it happen. So you don't give into it.
No, well, that's what I think. There's this sort of growing victim mentality, and that I don't know about you, and I don't want to go off too much of a tangent here, but having travelled around the world a bit, we're the most over-regulated, over-compliant country on earth, and I can see it stifling innovation, and what it tends to do is put a safety net and drop everything down to the lowest common denominator, where we're catering for the full rather than empowering the bright. What's your view on all of that?
Yeah, I agree with all that. Look, I spent a year living in the US in 2008, 2009. So that taught me a lot. It was funny when I first got there. I had this. I was working with Google in California, and in sort of the Bay Area, California, Mountain View, and I thought you'd have these moments where you'd think, why are those people doing that? Why isn't someone stopping them? Why is the government letting that happen? You know what I mean? It was weird, and you wouldn't say it out loud, but you'd think like, oh my God, look at them! How how crazy are those? Why isn't someone stopping them? And to the point, and I was only away like 15 months, I want to say, maybe 14 months, and came back to Australia. And in the end, we're sort of going, why aren't they letting us do that? I'd turned around that fast. You don't realize just how suffocating it is. It is truly, truly suffocating. And the lunacy we're seeing right now with the COVID response is the apex of apex, or I hope not the thin edge of the wedge of what's going on. So
yeah,
no, definitely overregulated. I mean, the thing is that the weird thing is what we've done to Australia. I mean, I talk about entrepreneurs going up and setting up in the US, and I sort of there's a few cautionary tales there, like that depending how you count them, there's there's nigh on 10,000 taxation jurisdictions in the US.
Right. Yeah.
So, because every state, every city, county, etc., and unincorporated areas which have no sort of local authorities over them can do their own thing, so to speak.
Yeah.
We see that as a bug. As Americans see that as a feature. They'll go and move to the area that actually suits their lifestyle and how they want to contribute to the community the best, if you know what I mean. And to the point now where you have New Hampshire, I want to say that's New Hampshire. Whose state motto is "Live free or die," which I think is a fantastic state motto. But they're one of the biggest libertarian states. That they're literally, then they're talking about seceding from the union, which I think it's rubbish personally. But you've actually got people out there who just really, really, really want to be left alone. You come back to Australia, so you have this choice to move to these massively freedom-loving areas, or you can go to the high government touch suffocating areas, Washington State, California, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
You come to Australia, and because we've homogenised our society, literally corporate taxes the same everywhere. Literally, we are purposely trying to make every part of Australia like every other part of Australia. So the only choice you get where to live is weather.
That's right.
What sort of climate do you want? I mean, that's just ridiculous. I think. Sorry, I'm ranting a little bit here, Bushy, but
no, you're not, mate. It's this is a sort of conversation that we don't have.
Yeah, so, no, I think it comes down to the fact that our federation for our modern times is fundamentally broken, and we broke it for good reasons back during World War II when we centralised taxing powers with the federal government. So I'm a huge fan of state governments, and people I'm actually a huge fan of more government, not less government. More democratic representation, not more public service, more democratic representation. Because I think the closer you get democracy to the people, the better the outcomes are, because people can make their own decisions.
Yes.
I would fear people talk about eliminating the states as a level of politics in Australia. Could you imagine? I imagine, mate, you're in Adelaide, are you? Is that right? Or
yeah, I'm based in Adelaide. We're actually down the Morney Peninsula in Melbourne at the moment, mate.
Yeah.
Thanks to COVID, but
no worries. But you can imagine as someone living in Adelaide, you imagine having to petition Canberra for money for a new hospital, for example, in competition with like Hobart, where Tassie has 10 senators, right? And that, so everyone gets, every 30,000 people gets a vote for their senator, whereas in South Australia probably 120. So no, I think we need more political representation closer to the people. That is not more public servants. By God, that's not more public servants. That's just more political representatives. So I think and that's what I think you saw out of Brexit as well. You actually saw people wanting their own control over their own future.
Yes.
For example, so getting out of those larger political unions. So I think that by long story short, sorry, man, I'm rambling here.
No, this is good, mate. It's
very, very, very keen to see that. I'd love to see income taxing powers devolve back to the state. Now, we should keep the ATO as a central place you send your money, but the state should then say so. Because you do want a administratively simple way to actually do this. But the states can just say, let's say that the Commonwealth take the first 20%. So from 0 to 20%, that's the Commonwealth take, for example, and then the states get to levy everything above that.
Yeah,
so if Queensland wanted to, and so the problem you've got lots of problems. Sorry, man, I am going.
This is good. No, this is great.
The problem you got is and I like this, is that the federal government can't bias one state over another, which I think is great. That's how it should be. Yeah. But as a result, the federal government can't sort of say, for example, well, we have a problem in North Queensland. We have all these resources, all this water, but no one lives up there. How do we get people up there? Now, the easiest way to move people around is actually give them a financial incentive, not give them subsidies, give them a financial incentive.
Yes.
So it'd be like, okay, so let's say if you live north of the Tropic of Capricorn, for example, in Queensland, then your max POI, your max taxation rate's not 47 cents, whatever it is in the dollar, it's only 38, for example.
Yep.
You can't actually do that because of that non-bias stuff in the Constitution. So if those taxing powers were devolved back to the states can do that. So then all of a sudden the Queensland government could say, right, how do we get massive growth in North Queensland? Okay, so max income rate in Northern Queensland is, let's say, 40 cents in the dollar after you don't pay any more, and you'd empty Sydney into North Queensland.
Yeah. Well, it's happening right now because of COVID, mate. But
that's Melbourne, right? Thanks to Dan Andrews, the bloody muppet. But anyway, so yeah, for me, so it comes down to, yes, I think we are over government. We've done it to ourselves and somewhat gleefully, and it has been the boiling frog to your analogy in the intro, I think. So, but let's hand back. And so right now, you've seen during COVID, you've seen these states just doing the dumbest things, and then not much begging to Canberra, but insulting Canberra for more money, and Canberra giving it to them, which is even worse. So, so I've got no problems with individual jurisdictions undertaking their own coronavirus, own health, or whatever might be policies. They just should be forced to pay for it.
Yes, spot on.
And that would then actually generate a real conversation with the electorate who would say, yes, we don't mind strangling our economy in order to have an X, Y, Z outcome. Or maybe there's a middle ground, if you know what I mean, which we haven't explored to this point.
Well, the over governance and over compliance has created this sort of subservient sheep-like response at times, which means that those hard conversations don't get had. And I don't know about you, but I think we're in a bit of a leadership void right now. And as a country boy, I come from a world where we operate under what I affectionately refer to as the 100-0 formula. That is 100% personal accountability and zero excuses. But what I see a lot of leaders, both in government and even in the corporate sphere, mate, they operate on the opposite. It's 0-100, zero accountability and 100% excuses. But what's your read of all of that?
Yeah. Look, it's look, I don't disagree. Look, I think that good leaders are hard to find, if you know what I mean. And in some respects, I want good leaders, because good leaders, really good leaders usually only come out of adversity, right?
Yeah.
So that there's a natural ebb and flow to life where, that certain people are required during certain times. And I think coming out of this COVID and coming out of the absolute dead headache, and that the next person I hear and say, but we've done so well during COVID. If you ignore the credit card bill. And I'm sorry, you're not the chairman of a company who just stood down 85 people the other day either, are you? Because they weren't essential workers, which I think is the most grotesque statement to come out of this entire thing. All work's essential. I find it to be just the level of, I don't know, cognitive dissonance or something about how people can just view others, the lot of others, is freaking astounding. If you can sit at home behind a keyboard, then who really cares? Whether the guy's got to operate the CNC machine or the person who's got to go and service the tower or whatever it might be.
Yep.
The real jobs in Australia who actually keep things going. I find, I don't know. I'm not much of a real estate or a landowner. We've got a holiday house and a couple of leftover rental properties that we've just got some lovely tenants in. We don't want to put the rent up or sell, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So, but I had really considered buying 200 acres during this COVID thing and putting 7 strands of barbed wire around it to keep my fellow citizen out. Because in this right now, what's been demonstrated is that 51% would vote to jail the other 49% of us. We have no inherent rights. It's the one thing to say about the US is they're not a democracy. The US is not a democracy. They're a constitutional republic. Yeah. And the citizens have rights that politicians cannot take, for as much as they're trying to take them away, that they can't take away through the first 10, whatever it is, amendments of their constitution, the Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
So, you have the right to free speech. You have the right to bear arms. For as much as Australians might find that statement a little bit interesting, given our history and our subservience when it comes to I'm an ex-soldier. I don't think that we should possess military-style weapons. I think they're designed for one thing, and that's to quickly and effectively murder as many people as possible. In the hands of soldiers, that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
But in the hands of so I think there are limits there. But do you want to, have you ever seen US police act like Melbourne police having those rights?
No, never.
You know why? They're scared. The crowd is armed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying I don't want armed crowds, I don't want armed people, but my God, that's a hell of a balance, isn't it? I've never seen police in the US act like that. During those Black Lives Matter riots, they pretty well just put a bit of it back, but they tried to keep the riots contained.
Yeah.
They didn't get in there with freaking pepper balls and plastic bullets and all the rest of it, and the disgraceful. No, we've And the whole thing about us, we talk about country boy, and I heard a good podcast the other day, a lady called Helen Dale. I met at a conference a few years ago. She's an author who got cancelled in Australia because it turns out that she culturally appropriated a character. I always thought authors were meant to culturally appropriate characters, but you're not allowed to do that. Apparently, that's part of the description of being an author, right? But she gave a great interview on a podcast, I want to say, called Trigonometry or something I was listening to.
Yep.
And she was saying that Australia, while we have this opinion that we're the descendants of convicts, you've got to remember the jailers are also amongst us, and they're the police. And honestly, they're the police and the public servants. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. I actually totally get it.
Yeah, that's a pretty good analogy, actually, mate. That sums it up pretty well. I know we've
strayed, haven't we? We've strayed.
We have a bit, but
it's talking points, that's for sure.
It's a great conversation, because this is something I wouldn't mind your thoughts on as well, because I just think that we've sort of lost the pathway in relation to resilience, mate. We sort of pussyfoot around, and we overcompensate, particularly our kids and young. We sort of wrap them in cotton wool, and we don't allow them to make mistakes. I'm just a little bit fearful where that's going to end up. What's your read around resilience and sort of getting back to some real resilience, given what we're seeing in some of the citizens these days?
Yeah. Look, I think that if we're worried about, and I am concerned about resilience in young people, and I think that it's us who are to blame, because we're the ones who've actually allowed it to happen. So, and all for the right reason. What is it? The road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? Yeah. So, we need more of it. We literally do. I had a speech. I've been asked over the last few years to be an Australia ambassador. So I go to these beautiful little towns on the outskirts of Brisbane, Esk, and similar places, and do an Australia speech in 10, 15 minutes. It's quite nice. You get to see the local fete. They've got some sort of historical reconstruction going on. People dressed up. They're lovely days. I love them.
Yeah.
And I talk about the resilience of the Australian, if you know what I mean, about what we can do and what we can't do. And it does concern me. We are, we're the people who storm. We literally are the bronze sons of Anzacs. Is how I think about ourselves. We have an amazing heritage that we don't give enough kudos to. We treat very, very glibly, I suppose, and a lot of people out and out hate, which is even worse. So,
scary.
yeah. So, resilience, mate. That's where we were going, weren't we? Sorry, I'm just sort of getting a bit lost here.
No, you're good. No, and I think that coming back to that common element, the military background. When I was in the States, I was really shocked by the difference in the way the military were treated versus the way they're treated here. Because even to get on a plane from the military, you go straight to the front of the queue and straight to the best seat, and everyone almost bows down with deference to anyone who's in the armed forces in the States. Very, very different exercise here. And that goes to, I think, us turning our back on our history as somehow bad, or I don't know what it is. I'm not sure why we don't respect that heritage and respect the people who put their lives on the line to create the freedoms that we now enjoy. What's your read of all of that?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more deference paid to the armed services in the US. Just sort of I think it's a bit over the top at times, to be honest. I don't think we should be. I think my preference would be for the armed services to be respected, but not lionised, I think. So I think we probably are missing a treat there. I believe I love Anzac Day, for example, if you know. I mean, I didn't march. I've only marched in the last couple of years. I didn't deploy an active service, so I didn't see Anzac Day as being a thing I should be marching at, because to me it was about returned servicemen, not ex-servicemen.
Yeah.
And up here in Brisbane, some bloody Muslim rat bags were threatening to come out and start some trouble. So I thought, that's it, I'm in. So I went and marched. Didn't happen, thankfully. Excuse me, which is great. It was just some gobs in the press.
Yeah.
So, so no, I think we got it right in Australia for the most part. I mean, there's been some disappointing stuff recently. I think with some of the fallout of what occurred in Afghanistan, and invested in a couple of businesses with chaps out of the Special Forces community in there, and you hear an interesting side of that, I suppose.
Yeah.
But no, I think we've mostly got it right. To be honest, we don't want a militaristic society. I don't want the military in the streets. I don't want the. I was depressed when I saw the military, even being in a logistical form, being used during the COVID stuff. I'm like, have we really gone here? Have we thought through this very hard? No, I've very little during COVID, except Dominic Perrottet in the last couple of days has impressed me at this point in time.
Yeah, I don't listen to the news, mate, because it's all bad news. But you obviously, what gives you that impression from him?
Oh, well, he held a news, I think his first full day in the office, he held a news conference without New South Wales' chief health officer in attendance. And when asked why, he said, well, why isn't the chief health officer there? Isn't this a health crisis? He said, yes, it's also an economic crisis. I've taken advice from her. I've taken advice from Treasury. And I'm here making decisions.
Love it.
Oh, thank Christ, about time.
Love it.
I've just paraphrased what he said. I've probably got a bit of that wrong, but that's my understanding the paraphrase.
Well, that's refreshing, mate. It's very refreshing.
Yeah, so we have a way through this. Let's just hope we can get there.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, I'm going to do a big circle back and go back to the stage where you sort of entered into the SENet exercise. I'm just interested in getting your thoughts on. You're in the army. That's a full-time exercise right there. You've decided to go down the SENet road. I'd just love, I know it's a long time ago, but I'd love to sort of dig into what was your thinking? Why did you even veer down that pathway? And I'm assuming you basically started the business when you're still with the army. Can you talk us through your thinking and where that all led to at the time?
Yeah, look, I'm not too sure I was thinking very much at the time, to be honest. And it was a long time ago. So look, I really enjoy my time as a soldier. However, I was predominantly serving in a peacetime army. There were some peacekeeping missions that were going on, but for the most part, we weren't doing what I wanted to do in the army, which was to deploy overseas and be tested to the fullest of what I've been trained for. Fight, to be quite blunt.
Yep.
So really, my job was to support those who fought, but nonetheless, it was, I wanted to, I wasn't getting that, and I was somewhat frustrated. I think a lot of the army was.
Yeah.
So I saw an opportunity to get out, or I saw the opportunity to start a business. That being a dial-up internet service provider.
Why there, mate? I'm just interested in the thinking, because that would have been a needle in a haystack at the time. What was the attraction? What was like, shit, I'm going to have a crack at this?
No, no, it was the only way to do it at the time. But I don't know whether I'm not too sure how to phrase your needle and haystack term there. But essentially, the way you accessed the internet back in 1994 was you bought a dial-up modem, somewhere between 2,400 bits per second and 14,400 bits per second, and you plugged it into a computer, plugged it into a telephone line, and hopefully 3 times out of 5 it worked. It was horrible technology. It was slow and it'd drop out and you name it, but it was the only game around, right?
Yeah.
And it was just spectacular that those, that first, when you realize through a computer, you could read so much, you could see so much, you could communicate a lot more widely. To me, it was an obvious way the world was going to go. And I wanted to be part of it. And I'd done a little bit of study. The thing about the army, when you go on these exercises, you do between 5 weeks and my longest was about 4.5, 5 months. And they were mostly very boring. Literally, you take lots and lots of books for your audience. You had an older audience, so they remember books, I imagine, the older audience. These things we used to make out of dead trees. And then I enrolled in a part-time, fully external computing degree, essentially, and just did that because it was something to do. And
I think you're playing it down a little bit, mate, because hindsight's really easy when you look back now and go, oh, well, it's obvious the internet was the future, but it wasn't the future at the time, mate. It was the brave new frontier.
Yeah, look, I suppose when I saw that, because I'd gotten into if you recall the BBS services where you used to dial up just a guy's private computer. He had a bigger computer than yours, a bigger hard drive, and more files that you could download. So you dial him up and you download his stuff. It was the only way to get pirate software, basically. And And then, then it became, no, that didn't become the internet. That sort of stayed as is, to be honest. But then the internet came and it was this amazingly larger, bigger, more incredible, well-connected BBS type thing. And to me, it was dang obvious. I didn't think, I was asked to do a talk years later and I was told, I was forced to go back and think about when I started that business, why did I do that? What did I see was going to change? So I sat down and recall some of the things. And remember back then we used to buy CD-ROMs. We used to buy, and music and also software content.
Yeah, that's right.
Instantly I knew that, okay, that's going online. That stuff, that's just data. That's going to come over this. This thing will get faster. It'll come over that. And, you can see I could see banking. Because banking to me was just a dead end thing. You could transfer bits on a screen as easy as you could walk into a branch and transfer bits using a deposits form, excuse me, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So there was some really easy things to see that were going to go online, travel booking offer. And it's, the fact that Flight Centre still has some shops in supermarkets amazes me. But you can see some things actually really going online quite well. Some things I never, ever would have guessed. Buying mattresses, buying shoes, buying dresses. That still surprises the daylights out of me. But that's got probably more to do with the Southeast Asian or primarily the cheap China manufacture miracle, which is, they come back to bite us now, that miracle, excuse me. So that, a culmination there between, I think, a rising middle class in China and what they did for the price of goods, increasing technology. But and so some of the things that were enabled and made possible, I never dreamed of. But I probably got about a quarter of them right, I think, to be honest. So,
yep. Well, I mean, and I'm guessing that you started the business on the kitchen table and after hours, pretty much, and then I wouldn't mind you just sharing the growth story on that, mate, because that'd be a bit of an eye opener for.
Oh yeah, right. So started. This is where I met our mutual friend Chris. Started going along to this a computer user group, like a club, social club in Adelaide, in sort of 93, 94. Ended up hosting a lot of the meetings at my place just to learn more about this weird computer operating system called Linux at the time.
Yeah.
And once you got it going, you realize that you could plug modems into the back of it and other people could dial you. And more importantly, you could dial that bigger internet link further upstream and you could become a part of the internet, which is just like so cool. So, we had an $11,000 home loan deposit, myself and my now wife, my then fiance, we'd saved.
Yeah.
We were living in Flagstaff Hill, which is a great little suburb in Adelaide. Chris just lived around the corner. And I thought, well, there you go. I was actually in a rented Army married quarter. And I thought, I need to start this business. I need to install I think I installed 14 phone lines. And people asked me, was that hard to get permission to install the phone lines as well? I knew they'd say no, so it was a pointless conversation. So I just went and did it. So installed 14 phone lines in a rented Army married quarter. We ended up buying the house next door. And there's two reasons we bought it. A was for sale, and the people that owned it lived across the road. And they told us the rock dollar bottom price they'd take for it, which was in our price range, accidentally, without knowing we're in the market. And then it was actually, and the cable had more slack on that side, so I could pull it towards. So we actually had enough room to pull out the Telstra cable without telling Telstra, because it was going to cost us $6,000 to relocate. So I just went and dug the thing up and did it myself. Then sort of told Telstra later. So that it moved from one house to the second house, and then probably about 8-10 months after that, I started that business in November '94. I got out of the Army. I took a month off leave without pay in May '95, and it just went nuts, absolutely crazy. Went back and saw my boss in the Army and said, Major Shanks was a fantastic man, and said, boss, it's going well. I'd like to get out, and the unit I was in, I think had slots. So of my trade stream, I think it was about 5 of us, and I was the only one left, and we were the air defence unit for the nation. And he's like, well, Steve, I can't really let you go, type thing. So, but there's a big exercise coming up, Kangaroo 95. So I was due to get out in the following January. He said, look, if you play the game, do the right thing, I'll put a recommendation in for early discharge, which is the best I could hope for, to be honest. Yeah. And I was 2 days in that exercise, and he said, that's it. He basically signed it. I think it was an accident, but he essentially proved my discharge about 10 days after I got back. So I got out in September that year. We ended up, Chris bought into the business soon after that. Then we ended up moving from Flagstaff Hill down into Grote Street, 222 Grote Street, Adelaide. And fantastic premises, fantastic place. And just, it took off like you wouldn't believe. Definitely got $11,000 back. We ended up renting the first 160 metres. We ended up renting the place next door and another little place at the back and a place over the road, and having about 70 staff by the time we were done.
Massive growth spurt. The challenge of that would have been pretty big, mate, going from zero to a pretty large business in a very short space of time. Those growing pains aren't easy. Talk to us about, what you went through then, and then why sell? What was the decision to sell? What forced the hand in that regard?
Yeah, right. So I look back now. Everything's, nothing's that simple, but there's nothing too titanic to get over it, aside from what prompted me to want to sell, I suppose.
Yeah.
I remember in the lead up to Christmas, one of our biggest problem was, I think we had like our armed robbery insurance for cash or something like 17 grand or something. I can't remember. I think it was in the teens, 17, 13 grand or something like that. Would sometimes have to get, and down the bank they had, you could go and put the money safe, the big metal safe on the outside of the bank building. You could put your deposits in, your deposit box.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
We sometimes had to visit that 3 times a day.
Good problem to have.
I know, but it wasn't all. But if that was every day, that would have been fantastic. So obviously, if it's in that deposit box and it's got more insurance than we could carry, so we made sure we weren't going to get knocked over by it. Because obviously, South Australia is a place where people enjoy the herby delights of certain bushes. So so the reason to sell. So we were at the behest of Telstra, and my second business as well. This is somewhat similar, although I'd learned a lot going into the second business. But Telstra is an evil organisation. Everyone, people in there are quite nice, but it's a former government department term monopoly, and then privatised, and then basically given permission just to be an absolute thug.
Yeah,
so
with very deep pockets. So that's a pretty dangerous combination.
It is, yeah. And they're almost your sole provider of external services, and also your biggest competitor. It's a dreadful position to be in. And we had one instance where they actually installed a piece of equipment on premises in order to get us telephone lines installed faster. Our biggest problem is actually putting enough telephone lines on in order to actually keep up with demand.
Yeah.
So they pull this thing in, which everyone now knows the term of a RIM, because it's got back from the DSL broadband days. Everyone, if you're on a RIM, you knew you were actually in trouble because they were terrible for high speed. Yeah. So they put this RIM into our premises on the promise they could provision lines faster, and they could. But we went from getting, I want to say at that stage we were probably at the max modem speed was about 38.4. I want to say at the time 38,400 baud. That was the latest tech, and we went from people averaging probably that down to, and the poorer quality of the telephone line, the less it would connect at. The point where, if you recall back in the dial-up days, a lot of people, if you had a 38.4 modem and you connected at 33, excuse me, it was 33.6, not 38.4. If you had a 33.6 modem and you connected at 29,000, you'd hang up and start again because it was 10% too slow.
Yeah.
So then our average connection speed started being like 24, 25,000. We went from putting on 50 people a day to losing 20 a day.
Yeah.
And that was just horrific to go through. We ended up getting a confidential settlement at Telstra. I can't remember what it was for now, but it was just basically an absolute fat, dumb configuration mistake. But it took about 6 or 8 weeks.
Yeah.
That was just like, that was horrible.
Yeah, it would have been scary. So you sort of read the writing on the wall that it was better to.
Well, that was a mistake, right? What if they meant to do it? We're done. We're cooked.
Yeah. Yeah.
So. They've never actually gone and actually done that, if you know what I mean. And so when it got to our second business, we learned that because once again, Telstra was our biggest supplier and our biggest competitor. We're picking well, don't I?
But here's the thing though. The good news about that, and the smart thing that you've done about that, whether you did it by design or it just happened that way, is that you set yourself up in a position where you become very attractive to those bigger animals, and as a consequence of that, can reap the rewards and take some chips off the table.
Yeah, that's what we did, I suppose. Yeah, so out of that, we started those conversations with a few people and ended up exiting out to Aussie Mail at the time, although it ended up being MCI WorldCom, because as we were selling to Aussie Mail, they were acquired by MCI WorldCom. So they actually ended up exiting out to those guys. Same company, just, it was just a corporate sort of shell game. And that was, the only really disappointing part of that was that the first half was under the old CGT regime.
Yep.
The second half was under the new CGT regime, so it was better. Well, the other second half was like, also we sold 55 or 60% the first bit, and then the remainder of the second tranche. It was a little bit over half the first time, and the remainder the second time.
Yeah. Okay.
So, that gave me a new, interesting respect for taxation. That's for sure.
Oh, I bet it did, mate. Because that was pre the CGT discount in those days too, I think, wasn't it?
Gardening, just going to take half what you got. Thank you, we'll take half.
Bang.
Just
For all that, how it worked. Let's bridge into pipe networks then, because you moved back to Queensland. You obviously saw another opportunity in the same sort of sphere. Talk to us briefly about that and again, the reason for exiting to then sort of take you into what you're currently doing.
Yeah, cool. So moved back to Brisbane, ended up getting a job for a little while, working as I quite enjoy the technical stuff. So I ended up working as a network engineer for AAPT, which is fascinating, which is sort of good. They had a big bank contract we were doing at the time.
Yep.
Deploying lots of networks and hardware to these remote locations. It was a lot of fun. But then I sort of realised I was somewhat unemployable at that point in time too. Met up with an old chap I used to go to school. Well, we're in separate grades, and mums are best friends. We used to play tennis together on weekends, things like that. So we
okay.
Quite well. And he was pushing a few ideas around and wanted someone to assist him in on the technical side and discussions with some VCs he was talking to, which I did.
Yep.
And that never went anywhere. The .com crash happened sort of during that as well, which wasn't helpful for those sort of discussions.
Yeah.
And then, the way that was being proposed was pretty suboptimal anyway. And I said, well, look, if we did it this way, and a lot of ways proposing I'd done as part of running SENet and doing some of the wholesale interconnection stuff that we did in Adelaide with a lot of our people we cooperated with who were essentially our competitors. So Pipe actually stood for Public IP Exchange.
Okay.
So we set up a system that allowed people to interconnect through a trusted third party, being us, Pipe, to exchange traffic. So to basically cooperate with their competitors without having to talk to them directly.
Okay.
So check clearinghouse, a lot of people called it. It was described as like a network check clearinghouse, which is an okay term, I suppose.
Yeah.
And that was good. That was good business. We recut that. We funded it ourselves instead of I don't know, Bevan was trying to get $1.5 million fund. I can't recall at the time actually. It was at least a couple of $1 million back in 2001. We had funding with $150,000 between us.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
and then just the first 6 months was slow, and we finally started to get traction and move it forward. So and then we got into the data, primarily just interconnecting ISPs together with a little bit of co-location data center space. Data center is a big industry now, obviously.
Yep.
And then we started building our own fibre networks between the locations that we needed to do, and the fibre business became the bigger business, and the next biggest one after that was the data center business, and then there was the interconnection business.
That brings us to the close of part 1 of Bushy's great chat with Steve Baxter. So stay tuned for the rest of the conversation next episode, where Steve talks about the life-changing sale of Pipe Networks, where he became financially free beyond most people's dreams, then went on to work in the US for Google, before becoming a shark on the popular Shark Tank show and entering the world of venture capital and angel investment. Don't miss it.
To get a summary of all this investment gold in the show notes, just email me on hello@khgroup.com.au. That's hello@khgroup.com.au. Or check us out at www.bushymartin.com.au/getinvested. I look forward to joining you next week for another episode of the Get Invested podcast. So thanks for listening, and as always, dream as if you live forever and live as if you die